Hello, what's up, dear YouTube viewers? It's hard to believe, but the World Cup is already over. It seems like not so long ago we were making our predictions as to what will happen at the World Cup and waiting for the first match. Now it's all over. And we already know the results of all matches and everything that happened in this World Cup. So in this video, I would like to share with you what I like and what I didn't like at the World Cup. Some of those are about the football itself and some of those are about the events surrounding it, because oftentimes we remember not just the soccer itself but the events that actually happened the events that actually happened outside the soccer stadium. Okay, so let's start with the positives. So let's start with what I liked. One thing I like is that there was a nice golden boot race. Before, it was pretty much obvious on who would win the golden boot. We saw how Miroslav Klose won without any resistance before and how Messi has won it before. But this time there was finally a competitive race between it. Oftentimes within the teams itself, not just between players of different teams. Some examples of players who look close to challenging for the golden boot are Vinicius Jr. for Brazil, Kylian Mbappe and Ousmane Dembele from France, Lionel Messi from Argentina, Mikel Oyarzabal from Spain, Erling Haaland from Norway, and many others. I don't think ever before we had seen such a competitive race. And we never knew who would the winner be until the final. However, at the end, the final decided everything. The final and the match for third place, because Kylian Mbappe ended up scoring a double and Lionel Messi didn't score any goals in the final. So that was ultimately what decided the race. So I'm really happy that we had a competitive race instead of just one player winning. I think sometimes that can be even more interesting than the World Cup matches themselves. Okay, next up is that even outsider teams looked really decent, or not outsider teams, but even teams that got last places looked really decent and tried their best to make it out of the group stages. Now, sometimes at other World Cup, we see teams who just completely lose everything, and we just wanna ask, why did you even come here? What was the point of spending all this money to get to the World Cup? For example, in 2018 we saw Panama completely get defeated in most of their matches. I think they got defeated with a huge score to England and Belgium, and I think they got defeated to Tunisia. I don't remember the exact score line. We also saw in 2018 how Saudi Arabia lost most of their games and didn't even try to score anything in return. For example, they lost to Russia 5-0. This time, it isn't like that. Sure, some teams got fourth place in the group, but they tried their hardest. For example, Haiti scored twice against Morocco and twice had the lead against them. Iraq kept the score with Norway 1-1 for a long time. Jordan scored in each of their games. And Curacao actually got a chance to score one against Germany and could have scored more. but they just got unlucky. The only team who I would say didn't try their best at this tournament is Tunisia, which I already talked about in a separate video. But basically what I want to say is that the Tunisian players were good, but the strategies that the team picked and firing their coach in the middle didn't do much good for them. But even they got a chance to score 2 goals against Sweden, one against Sweden and one against the Netherlands. So that's something that's really pleasing to me. And I'm really happy that a lot of times it really looked like two equal teams were playing instead of just a clear favorite playing against a clear outsider. And I don't wanna offend any country's fans who I mentioned in this video before. Or I really hope that in the future your teams do better than, for example, they did in the 2018 World Cup. But the truth is that this World Cup was much more competitive than some other World Cup. Okay, next up is that the expansion of the tournament to 48 teams allowed us to see competitive football that we wouldn't otherwise have seen. For example, take into consideration the Senegal versus Iraq game, where before neither Senegal nor Iraq would have made it out of the group stage, because no best third place team makes it out. And such Iraq and Senegal both lost their first 2 matches, they would have knew they have nothing to play for, and this would have been a really boring game. Perhaps maybe it would have even ended in a new draw. But now, because Senegal knew that they could still get out of the group stage as a third place team, they scored 5 against Iraq and give neutral football fans a lot of goals. Which of course Iraqi fans are not happy about, but I think that for most people it's good to see 5 goals. Again, don't wanna offend anyone from Iraq. I really feel sorry that your team didn't win, but I think they really got unlucky with that red card. Another example is the situation between Austria and Algeria, when Algeria and Austria needed to desperately fight for the third place spot, and depending on who makes it, it would have been either Austria doesn't make it or Algeria doesn't make it, or both of them make it, but Iran does not make it, and at the end they ended up fighting really hardly for that third place spot. So I think as much as many people were hating on the expansion of the tournament to 48 teams and third place making it out of the group, I actually think it was a good thing, because now teams had more motivations to play. Okay, next up is that Ferran Torres got a chance to be a hero for his nation. Now for me, this is one of the best parts of all tournaments, when a player who many people were hating on and who we thought is not a good player suddenly becomes a hero for his nation or club and turns his career around massively. This is what happened to Ferran Torres. Before the tournament, many players and fans, not players but fans, were hating on Ferran Torres for his lack of realization of his chances. In fact, like I said before, even Torres' own grandfather said that it would be better if he played for Levante instead of Barcelona, and didn't believe that he would score. But at the end, what we saw was one of the best moments of the whole tournament. Ferran Torres scored the only goal in the final and became the hero for his nation. And At a time when many other players couldn't score. Not even Michele Yarzabal, not even Mikel Merina, but Torres was able to do it. And I'm really hopeful that this goal will be a new chapter in his career and it will give him some confidence and that it will allow him to play more stable football at club level. Okay, next up, another thing I like is the fan traditions. For example, Norway had a good tradition of roll, 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 and even many neutral fans wanted to do it with them. For example, when I went to the Norway versus Ivory Coast game, I was cheering for Ivory Coast, but even I wanted to do the classic roll, roll, roll move with the Norwegian fans. Also, I really like the tradition of the Scottish fans to play their instrument, and many Bostonians, which was the town where they stayed, also like it and said that they wish they could have stayed for more. Also, I think it was a really impressive tradition of how Japanese fans cleaned the stadium after every match and cleaned up their trash. I think it was really good and shows very positive fan behavior. Also, the Mexican fans had cool tradition of waving their hands like this, I think, and like before every match, waving their hands into the air. I think this was really cool. I think it's important when fans have their own tradition and we have something to be entertained by. Okay, and finally, one thing I like is that there was good organization, at least at the stadium where I went to. Before going to the stadium, I was a little worried that there would be a massive crowd of people and that it would be hard to walk. But surprisingly, the organization at the stadium was actually very decent. The driver of the cable car offered us a ride to the stadium and we didn't have to walk as much. And we didn't even ask for it. They themselves thought that we were walking a long distance and offered us a ride. I don't know if it was the same at all other stadiums, but fortunately we didn't see a lot of fan fights and a lot of crownings at the stadium, so I think based on that we can infer that the organization of the tournament went better than what many people expected. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm just judging off of a very small sample, which was just one match at one stadium. So if you went to other matches and you saw something different about the organization, write your experience in the comments. But from what I saw, I was really impressed. Okay, now we are moving on to things that I didn't like. And unfortunately, there were some things. As much as I like this World Cup, some things that I think could have really gone differently and it would have been better. Okay, so for the start, let's start with controversial refereeing decisions. For example, in the game against Argentina and Algeria, Lionel Messi made a foul against the Algerian defender and didn't even get a yellow card for it. When on the other hand, when Folarin Balogun made the same foul against Tariq Muharemovic, he got a red card. And sure, it was cancelled later on, which I personally don't think was a good idea, which is something I talked about in another video. I think that if a card has been issued, it's best to take the red card and then after the punishment has been served, try to discuss what happened, which is something I talk about in another video, but I still think that referees should have universal rules. And unfortunately, at this World Cup, we didn't see it. We saw how Lionel Messi made a foul against Algeria, and he didn't get any cards, and the Algerian Federation already said they would file an appeal. We also saw how Ansari Konsa made a very questionable action in the game against Ghana, for which Ghana could have been awarded a penalty but wasn't, and some other controversial refereeing decisions. Perhaps the biggest one is in the Iran-Egypt game. Iran scored a goal, but it was cancelled by the referee at a time when, for the same exact foul in the England versus Norway game, the game by Norway wasn't cancelled. Now, I'm just an ordinary football fan. Maybe there is something I don't know about. I'm not trying to question the expertise of the referees. It's not up to me to decide again. Maybe I'm wrong. So, I'm not trying to say that my opinion is correct. Maybe if I had information, I would change it. But at least as of right now, it looks to me as if Lionel Messi wasn't given a card just because of his status, which I think is unfair. I think if you commit a foul, you should be given a card, no matter your status and no matter how much things you did in the past. I think all players should be treated equally, regardless of if it's a world-class player, an uprising star, or just some ordinary player who isn't well known outside of his own country. Okay, next up is the suspension of Russia. Now, I already gave you my opinion on it in another video called Top 10 Teams that I will miss at this World Cup, which you can watch later. But briefly summarized what I said there. So basically, I don't think FIFA is consistent with their rules. Yes, Russia did invade Ukraine, and people have different opinions on that war. But I don't get, if Russia was suspended from FIFA, why don't other countries who invade other countries don't face the same consequences? For example, Turkey has conducted operations in Syria many times, and many international organizations and other countries have criticized those operations, but Turkey was never suspended from FIFA. And in fact, Turkey is actually hosting the next Euros. And now I know Euro and World Cup are different things, and FIFA and UEFA are different organizations, but let's be honest, UEFA is one of the most influential parts of FIFA. So I think that if FIFA told UEFA to not allow the Euro to be hosted in Turkey, maybe they would have allowed differently. And same thing goes with President Trump. President Trump has literally invaded countries like Venezuela and Iran, and Infantino not only hasn't said anything to him, but has also given him a Nobel Peace Prize. So I just don't get it. I think this is a huge hypocrisy, and this is just double standards. Now again, I don't think the USA should be suspended from FIFA, nor any other country, and I actually support the USA, but I also don't think other countries should be suspended either. I think that FIFA should have universal rules and suspend countries only for misbehavior that actually has to do with the football of that country. Not with the actual events that happened in that country, because It's not the football players who decide those events. The maximum that they did was vote for a president. They are not the ones giving orders to do something. So I'm really, really hopeful that this changes. There are talks about that Russia might be returned to FIFA, which I'm very pleased about. And next year there will be an election. Next year there will be an election in president of FIFA, and maybe there will be a new president who will overlook this decision. But as of right now, I'm really upset with FIFA's policies and how they enforce their policies differently to different countries. I just don't get it. Okay, next is controversial decision by the US government as a host country. Okay, now people can have different opinions about the policies of President Donald Trump. People can like or dislike him, and I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm not trying to speak about the politics of President Donald Trump, but I'm trying to speak about what he did as a FIFA host person. And I think some of the things that he did were absolutely not good. For example, he refused to let in fans from Iran, Ivory Coast, Senegal, and some other countries. Which to me, there wasn't a good reason to do it. Now, I get it that there might be some fans who might be criminals. It has happened before. But it doesn't mean that we should ban all fans from coming. If there are some fans who disrespect, check individually those fans and prevent them from entering. But don't prevent everyone from that country from entering. I think this makes the World Cup much less enjoyable for people, because watching your country play at the World Cup can be a once in a lifetime experience, and that really damages your enjoyment of this World Cup. And FIFA has said that it's best when all countries are allowed to have fans, so I just don't get it. In addition to that, I also don't get why Trump decided to deport the Somalian referee. Now I know the situation in Somalia right now is honestly not the best. And I absolutely get it that there are some people who are criminal. But what does, not all of Somalia's people of course, but some of them. But the question is, what does all of this have to do with the Somalian referee? He is the referee who was verified by FIFA. So like FIFA literally checked him and they knew that he wasn't a criminal. So like, how does the fact that he is from Somalia have to do with him as an individual? And why was he deported? I just don't get it. This is unprecedented, and never before have a host nation deported a referee. And also I don't get, which something I said many times before, I don't get Trump's treatment of Iranian football players. Now, people can have different opinions about Iran's government. People can like them or not. But that doesn't mean that Iranian football players deserve to be treated the way they were treated. Because football players are football players, and there is literally a rule that their sport must be outside of politics. So, well, not a rule, but many people want that to be. So I just don't get it. Like, what is this? FIFA literally has a direct rule that says all teams must be given equal treatment and equal competition circumstance. And of course, Iran having to fly to Mexico every time definitely was not equal. Now, I think the problem is that it can backfire. Many Americans might think that they don't care about it because they are not affected by it. But guys, if one host country does it, what can happen next? Like, could another host country do the same? For example, if the World Cup is hosted in one of those countries where the United States government didn't let in fans come, could this country's government remember what the United States government did to them and as a revenge say we are not letting United States fans come, or we are not letting United States players to stay in our country? I feel like this can backfire really dangerously, and I don't like it. And especially what happened with the Iranian football players, I think this was really a disgrace. Again, people can have different opinion about the Iranian government. I get it, but players shouldn't be involved into politics. They are not the one making decisions in Iran. They are not the one conducting the politics. They are just players who play for the flag, not the government. And in the past, it has happened before that the World Cup was hosted in different countries and players come who didn't have the best of relationship with the host country, but the host country never said they shouldn't get here. As an example, I can give you how for the World Cup in Russia, many countries like England, Poland, and some other who Russia didn't have the best of relationships with qualified for the World Cup, but Russia didn't say to any of them, you must leave Russia after the match is over, you must move to another country and only come to Russia during the days of your match. No. Russia allowed all players to stay in this World Cup. So, and some other examples we can remember is when the World Cup was hosted in Argentina. The Argentine junta let all players stay in their country regardless of the government of those countries condemning violations of human rights. So I think this is truly unprecedented and it can backfire. And the cherry on the cake on top of everything is Trump's decision to call Johnny Infantino and overturn the red card. Now, like I said before, I personally don't think it should have been a red card. I think it should have been a yellow card. But that doesn't change the fact that overturning it after the match is already over is disgrace and something that has never happened before. Now, it would be one thing if Trump filed an official appellation procedure with FIFA and FIFA officially overturned, but no, Trump didn't do that. He just called the FIFA president and overturned that red card. So I think this was truly wrong. Never before has it happened that a country's political leader called the president of FIFA and overturned the decisions that FIFA made. This is just unprecedented. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a patriot of the USA and of the USA national football team. I supported them in games against Australia and Turkey and Paraguay. So I absolutely want the US national football team to win, and I absolutely want the World Cup to be hosted in the USA again sometime, for example in 2038. But when I see that something is going on that I don't like, I have to point it out, no matter who does it. And when this is going on, I had to say something about it. I'm not blaming the US as a whole for it. I think overall the staff in the US did very well with organization, like I said before, especially with the with the game where I went to, but so I want the World Cup to be hosted in the USA again, but I hope that something like that doesn't ever happen again. I really hopeful that this doesn't become a precedent and that this behavior will not repeat itself again. Okay, next up is expensive tickets. This is something I already talked about before. This is something I already talked about before when I was talking about my experience at the Nürburgring vs Ivory Coast game. But basically, to give you a perspective, the cost for the ticket to round of 32 game was the same as a trip to somewhere inside of the United States for a couple of days. And here we are talking about just one trip for 90 minutes. And that's just the ticket itself, not counting the transportation, the food. So for me, I think the price was overly expensive. Now, of course, I'm a realist and I don't think it's gonna be free. I understand that they need to make money off of it to conduct the World Cup, but I think there should be a limit as to how much money. Because the ticket to the final, the most expensive one, was like a couple $1,000,000, I think. Like, come on. Seriously, like a couple $1,000,000 for 90 minutes? Like, you must be kidding. And what's worse is that the final actually ended up not being as good as people expected. But that is something I will talk about in another thing. And even the tickets for some less important games costed up to a couple of $1,000. So I think this is way too expensive. I'm hopeful that next time tickets can be cheaper. And next time, if the World Cup is hosted in the USA in 2038, hopefully we can see tickets at a cheaper price and maybe more people will attend more games. Okay. The grievance before last that I have is that there wasn't a new World Cup champion. Now, to be fair, did Spain deserve to win the World Cup? My opinion is absolutely yes. They outclassed some world-class teams such as France with Kylian Mbappe, Portugal with Cristiano Ronaldo, or Argentina with Lionel Messi. So I'm not trying to say that Spain didn't deserve to win this World Cup, but as a fan, I personally would like to see new World Cup champions. Because I think that it's unjustifiable when the same countries end up going far over and over, and other countries don't end up winning it. This year, there were a couple of teams that look really strong and could have potentially challenged established football powerhouses for this first place spot. For example, the German Economist predicted the Netherlands to win the whole World Cup, and at the start, it really looked like they were one of the favorites. They absolutely dominated their group, and sure they tied with Japan, but it was mostly due to the heroism of the Japanese goalkeeper. Had it not been for that, Netherlands could have easily scored 3 goals. But then the round of 32 game against Morocco, Ronald Koeman didn't end up picking the right technique, and as a result, his team lost. Portugal also looked like a strong contender with players like João Neves and Vitinha, but At the end, because of the internal problems within the squad, they didn't end up doing as good. And for a time, I even thought like Belgium might actually have some chance after they beat the USA 4-1, because the USA was actually a good team themselves, and if a team beat them with such a big scoreline, they are clearly a good team. But unfortunately, in the next round they lost to Spain, even if doing their best. For a time I even thought like Norway might do it, but they lost to England. So unfortunately we didn't get a new World Cup champion this year, although many teams looked like they could have done it. However, the good news is that right now more and more teams are on the rise, and I think we could see a new World Cup champion in the next 4 years, or maybe in the next 8 years. Because Portugal, even without Cristiano Ronaldo, has a really good squad with Neves, Vitinha, and Mendes. Morocco is starting to improve, and their young squad just won the World Cup, so I think they could also do it. Norway with Erling Haaland has a super generation, so it could also be them. So I'm really hopeful that next time we will get a new world champion. Okay, and finally, last up is a bad final. Now, don't get me wrong. I think both sides were satisfied with that final. Spain was satisfied because they ended up winning, and Argentina was satisfied because they didn't lose as much as they could have. Because Spain completely dominated that game, and really it could have been 4-0 or even bigger. So I think the teams themselves were satisfied. But we as football fans were not satisfied because we wanted more goals, especially after seeing some good games like the third place game. We expected the final to be the cherry on the cake on top of everything and end with a lot of goals. But instead, we saw just one goal. And I'm really thankful for Ferran Torres for scoring that one goal and getting us rid of the need to watch extra time. But really, to watch the penalty shootout. But really, it could have been, but really, it almost came close to a penalty shootout. I think that the final could have been more interesting, especially considering the last final where there was 6 whole goals. Okay, so there you have my opinion, guys. And again, I really didn't want to offend anyone. If you disagree with my opinion, I understand that people can have different opinions. And again, I really didn't want to offend any person, and I'm really hopeful that I was understood the right way, but I also feel like there were some things going at this World Cup that I just had to speak about. So I expressed my opinion again. This doesn't mean that I am against the USA hosting again. I do think they should have another chance, but I had to acknowledge the wrongs that happened at this World Cup, as well as some positives too. Okay, bye guys. If you like this video, give it a thumb up. If you dislike it, give it a thumb down. Subscribe to my channel and wait for more content to come. And and leave comments. Bye guys. Hope you have a good day.